Aloha, everyone. This is Senator Mazie Hirono. Thank everyone for joining us on Facebook Live, focusing on the census. And today, I'm joined by three people to talk about the census in Hawaii. We have Charlotte Poe of the Census Bureau, Kuhio Lewis of the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, Debbie Kabibi of the Maui Economic Opportunity. So I know that, I hope the people in our state realize how important it is to participate in the census, because it is the census count for our state that will determine the resources, the amount of money that will come from the federal government for literally dozens and dozens of state programs that support our communities, including things like for our education, for lots of economic development issues, all of that. So that's why we have the guests we have today. And in fact, in 2017, $5.8 billion came to the state of Hawaii because of our participation in the census. And the fact is that the fewer the numbers of people participating in the state of Hawaii, the lower the amount of money we are going to get for all of the necessary programs. That is why it is so critical for everyone to submit their census forms. Now, during regular times, it's hard enough to get the kind of participation that we would like, but in a pandemic, it's even more challenging, and with an administration that has basically sabotaged the census efforts by a number of things, such as they went to court to try and keep undocumented people from being counted. That is unconstitutional, but they're fighting it out in the courts. They've tried to put a citizenship question on the census so as to scare people away, because we do have 11 million or so undocumented people in our country. The census requires everyone to be counted regardless of their immigration status. And they've also really very dangerously shortened the deadline. So we used to have until the end of October for the census data to be collected. The administration is trying to shorten that to September. That's also being fought out in court as to whether the Census Bureau can do that. They're also shortening the time for the Census Bureau to analyze the data. So previously, once the data came into the Census Bureau, they would have 6 months to analyze the data. That is a very important aspect of what needs to be done, but that is now shortened to only 3 months. But then they have increased the amount of time it takes for the states to get the census data information from 3 months to 4 months. So they're going to take a shorter time to analyze the data, but they will take a longer time to get the relevant data to the states. It raises concerns about the politicization of the census effort. So I want to thank all of you for the efforts that you're making to reach out to your communities, to encourage everyone to participate. And so with that, I'd like to hear, first of all, from Charlotte Poe of the Census Bureau. Why don't you share your experiences and information with us, Charlotte?
Sure. Thank you, Senator. I really appreciate the time and the space to be here and speak with everyone. Like the Senator said, like you've mentioned, we are in a time crunch. And this is actually really more of the time when it's important that individuals take the initiative to respond. This is absolutely one of the most important ways we influence and impact the flow of resources, like you said, right? And the opportunity to create really generational change, right? So when we look at the census and what we're doing in our operations to engage multiple communities. We're working with partners like CNHA and Kuhio, who is taking the lead of our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders Complete Count communities, right? Organizations like Debbie at Maui Economic Opportunities, and it is about increasing our reach and being able to get messaging out that is relevant for our communities on the ground level, right? You talked about the billions of dollars that flowed into Hawaii from a report that we had in 2017. That gets distributed out to our schools. So anyone who is still hesitant about responding or have, issues of fear or concerns, I understand that. But if we think about how long term and forward thinking we need to be as a community and as a people, this census count, like the importance you placed on it, it happens only once every 10 years. So that means if our children are 10 right now, they are going through a growth period where they have to elevate and hopefully increase their learning and their earning capacity. That means education and their job skills, work skills development, as well as hopefully business development. So they become business owners and can employ, right? All this kind of data is based upon what we give to the census. So respond, right, as quickly as you can. Don't wait for somebody to have to come knock on your door. Take the initiative, right? We have that power in our hands right now. And I speak, okay, so I know it's like on the census side, it is important because we need the data. And census collects the data, right? It is safe and confidential despite everything that's happening. And we can only release that in statistical and aggregate format. But in order for programs and those people who have control of the money to know where it needs to go, we have to tell them where we are, right? And that is what our response or your response represents is I am here, I am in this community and my community needs this. So we think about our schools, right? Some of the programs that get it are free and reduced school and lunches and breakfast, our Kupuna nutrition programs, our SNAP and WIC, right? Our housing assistance programs, our business development and workforce development, especially in this time of COVID-19, like you talked about it, right? Our people have been in survival mode for a long time, but we cannot lose track of the importance of the issue that census can bring resources we need for recovery, for rebuilding, and definitely for strengthening ourselves and positioning ourselves as Hawaii in all of our communities and counties to be much more resilient, right? So our 2010 census data has helped us to bring CARES Monies Act, right? Has helped us to bring monies and resources to recover from COVID and meet some of our immediate needs. Our participation today helps us to continue to recover and grow as we look forward, right? So we're not band-aiding. We've contributed to meet our immediate needs, and your participation, you completing it, encouraging your family and friends to do the same, helps us along this journey that we know we're going to have in order to not just be at the point we were before COVID, but to really thrive and be prosperous again, right? So you can still go online at my2020census.gov and do your response. Less than 10 minutes, right? It takes a few minutes. So just think of it as 10 minutes for 10 years, right? And then you can still call in 844-330-2020. And then the last thing I do want to say is that if you want to talk to somebody local here in Hawaii, right, the partnership specialists have our information out there. We're easily verified as a census worker, but especially my contact information, I will send it to Senator Hirono's office again. What I'm also doing for our residents here is if you want to speak to somebody local, you can text me, count me in, and I'll get back to you and help you through your questionnaire or answer questions and concerns. But I know people still do have. If people haven't responded on their own by now, there's a reason why, and I want to help to have that discussion. So thank you, Senator, for this time. And again, I appreciate the space and being able to speak to everyone. Aloha.
Hello, Charlotte. I think some of you, I'm not muted, so sometimes you hear some sort of responses from me because it's really hard for me not to be engaged with what you folks are saying. So forgive. So next we're going to hear from Kuhio Lewis of the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. Tell us what you've been experiencing and what's been going on with your community.
Morning, Senator, and good morning to everyone else. I want to start off by echoing some of the things that were already said. For the community that we particularly focus on, Native Hawaiians, you know, the resources that trickle down from the census, our Native Hawaiian Health Act, our education dollars, these are dollars that are helping our socially and economically disadvantaged Native Hawaiian community students gain access to much needed resources. And all of it comes from census data. So it's critical that we engage because the more representation we have in the census, the more opportunity exists. And even organizations like ours, Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, we go after federal funding, and what we do with that federal funding is we provide opportunities for our community. So it all trickles down census is very much relevant in our everyday lives. We don't always see it, we always don't understand it, but it all comes from a source of data, and that data is the census. That said, um, for our community, I think census data also means an elevation of our mana as a people. The higher the numbers, the more representation we have, the greater our stake is in decisions that are being made at the local level, at the state level, and even at the federal level. The more of us, I mean, in politics, oftentimes it derives from optics. So if you have a big representation, if you represent 20% of the population or 25% of the population, they're going to pay more attention to you than they would if you're only 10 or 15. So it's important we engage. Why? Again, so we can elevate our mana as a community, as a lahui. There's a lot of reasons why people aren't sure or are feeling insecure about responding to the census. And I think I think Shar could probably go a little bit more into detail about how information that you share is not going to be shared externally. It's really aggregated. Everything is protected by laws. Your information's protected, so it's not like it's going to be available. Someone can search you up in a database. This is probably the most protected database of all the other databases that we are part of, Facebook and Instagram. This data is not like that where it's shared. It's mainly to aggregate your community and determine the needs of that community. So it's safe. Um, and I also want to emphasize that I think challenges that we have seen on the ground is we move a lot. Hawaii's cost of living has gone up, and that forces us oftentimes to move 2, 3, 4 times. And so being able to track where you're at and be able to administer that census can be challenging when they don't necessarily know where you are. So be proactive. You still have an opportunity to go online, 2020census.gov, and update your records. Again, protected information, but it's so vital, so critical to our overall future, and to ensure that our voices and our mana as a community is elevated. So thank you, Senator, for another opportunity for us to share how important census is as we come near to the end of the census count.
Thank you very much, Kuhio. And next, we're going to hear from Debbie Kabibi of the Maui Economic Office, Economic Opportunity Office. Debbie?
Thank you, Senator Hirono. MEO is a community action agency, and we're funded with federal dollars. And our core funding is community service block grant money, which is tied into the poverty rate in the community, which is then determined by the outcome of the census. So, we have a very personal interest in this, and we have been very active in our community, trying to educate our clients about the importance, from our Head Start families and to the employees or to the clients that we have in our employment and training programs. And then we also have a Hispanic program called Enlace Hispano, and we work directly with the Hispanic community. And that's probably one of the areas where we have seen a lot of fear and concern about, even though we keep telling them that the data is secure and it's not going to be used against you, some comments that we've heard, and even speaking to a local immigration attorney, is that, that the community has a hard time separating the census from other government action. And because of the tone of the current administration, they're fearful that there's somehow that data is going to be collected some way and used against them, possibly, related to public charge or any of those other kind of, rules or laws that the administration is enforcing. So, some of the things that we have done, we've hosted with that community and with our other clients, talk story sessions before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, we've been doing it virtually. In Hana, our staff actually pulled out the phone book, and called, people and said, "Hey, Auntie, did you fill out the census?" We have had, education sessions with our Head Start families. We're part of the Mayor's Complete Counts Maui County Census Committee, and Maui County, our numbers are up. I mean, I think as of September 4th, we were at 52%, which is a 3% improvement over 2010. It's still not great. There's work to do. I know Senator Schatz and some other senators have a bill that they're trying to extend the time for the census collection, and I think that we're in support of that. I really don't know how to overcome that fear that is lingering, and it's not just with the immigrant community. I've had some local individuals, longtime Maui families say, well, I don't want to go online because, cybersecurity, or they're going to steal my identity or something. So if we can figure out a quick and concise way to calm those fears, I think that will go a long way in us achieving our goal. And I really want to thank you for this opportunity to share our thoughts and to let you know what's going on in Maui County.
Thank you, Debbie. You mentioned the participation rate, and it's relatively low in Hawaii, especially by self-responders. I note that, Charlotte, you said that if people haven't sent in their census mailing by now, that there's probably a reason. Although I think, I'd like to hear from you folks, what more we can do to reach out to the various communities, some of whom have concerns. And as you say, Debbie, it's not just the immigrant population, but it's others who fear that somehow people are going to get to have access to their own information through the internet, et cetera. So what more, in the time we have left for the census, what more can we be doing to assuage the fears of these, the legitimate fears often that people have of participating? And if you have any specific stories of fears that you've encountered within a community, for example, Charlotte, I think you reach out to the Pacific Islander community. That would be that would include the COFA citizens, and I think that's a group that has concerns. And what have you seen work with that community to bring them forward to participate? So let's just talk a little bit about some specific things that you think may work in the last few weeks left, unless we can win the court challenge to extend the deadline through October.
Yes,
Anyone?
so I'll chime in really quick
Charlotte?
on the Pacific Islander. Actually, to be honest, we have had multiple conversations across a lot of the ethnic groups, right? Our Native Hawaiian groups, our Hispanic groups, and definitely the Pacific Islanders. For our COFA, actually, we were able to connect. We have been able to do, and I say we as a census team in Hawaii, to really gain some traction by having key partners, right? And we have to find people who they trust in their communities. So like Kuhio was saying, and even Debbie, right, the groups they work with is for the Pacific Islanders. One of my other Pacific partnership specialists, Alyssa Peta, has done a great job connecting with like the Consulate General, connecting with some of their ministers or their faith-based leaders and community leaders to at least create the space for the conversations to happen. Like we know trust, just like relationships, take a little bit of time to develop, right? So at this point, it is more about looking at, yes, the self-response rates seem low, but when we look at the non-response follow-up that's happened by our field staff for census, it's really closed the gap, right? So yes, we haven't gotten everyone yet, because like we said, there are still people who have fear in there. And it's really about also working with them through the cost of the fear that they have and the potential benefits they can gain. So I'll speak to both, all of the groups we have, is we talk about where we want to protect our immediate positions, territories, homes, right, our privacy right now. But what we've also done is kind of handcuffed or stopped some of the opportunities that could come for our generations coming up after us, right? So we have this very holistic conversation around the cost and benefits of what our fear holds us to and how it limits us, right? And then also looking at, it's not us as census imposing this on them. It's about creating understanding and broadening that perspective for them. So on their own, they determine whether or not it is worth representing themselves, their families, their communities in this one process where Kuhio said, right, this data cannot be taken by any other agency or given to any other agency and used against you. It is not used to help determine your qualifications for benefits, right? So looking at that conversation for all of our ethnic groups and our communities has really actually helped. And they've come out, our COFA, our Pacific Islanders, Native Hawaiians, and the Hispanics, we're still trying to gain traction. But yes, overall, that kind of conversation has helped. And having that approach and other people do it will.
Charlotte, when you reach out to the communities, do you have gatherings where some of their elders come? As you say, relationships and trust are important issues for all kinds of communities, including the COFA citizens. So do you do it in a group kind of a setting where you get that message across and reassure them?
So, a lot of our people like to gather physically, right? And especially around food. And before COVID, yes, that was the plan. I mean, key partners, we were planning very big events to pull people out, right? Once COVID hit, we shifted as much as possible, as much as we could virtually. But we did still have smaller gatherings, especially with the elders who don't use, technology like we do, right? And we did have those conversations with them, especially now, food distributions, right? School grab and go meals when we're trying and touch and hit the families and the parents as well. All the different levels, from very high level where we've asked congressional members like yourself, can you please push out messages, to individual families on the ground. Yeah. So we've done a mix of those kind of events.
And Debbie, you've been doing outreach, and probably now with the COVID, you have to do this a little bit differently, virtually, trying to get people together to understand how important it is for each of them to participate. Same thing for Kuhio. What kind of methods are you using right now to reach out to your communities to explain how important it is that every single person is counted?
So I'll just say, I think at this point, almost everyone would have seen a census ad. I mean, they've inundated our airwaves. And so it's almost like busy at this point. So I think what's really critical is word of mouth, is about you encouraging others in your community to engage. Because, censuses are everywhere. And so if you don't see it, if you don't hear it, it's because you don't want to. And it's because you're ignoring it at this point. So it's really those personal relationships and encouragements that's going to make the difference. So ask your neighbor, have you taken the census yet? Ask your friends, or even in conversations. That's what's going to matter at this point, is that personal touch. I don't think the big media or any kind of outreach that we can come up with in the next 2 weeks is going to turn the tide. It's really, we need help pushing it out to your friends and your immediate networks.
Do you have kind of an organized effort to have people reach out in that person-to-person way, Cleo?
We've done a lot of phone banking too. So we've made over 30,000 phone calls to members of our community, encouraging them to do exactly that, to encourage your friends, your family, your ohana to engage in the census. We send out emails that can be forwarded. We've sent out a lot of emails, over 46,000 recipients every time we send it. So we've done a lot of the grassroots. We've, of course, our partners, Kamehameha Schools, OHA, Department of Hawaiian Homelands. It's been a coordinated effort. So mailers have come in. There's been newsletters going out to students. So there's been a multitude of efforts to try and capture as many as possible, which is why I say, I think everyone at this point has heard about census. It's just getting them over the finish line at this point.
Yes, it's actually getting them to fill out the form, or going online if they can be persuaded to trust that people are not going to have access to that information.
Yeah.
Did you want to add, Debbie, you folks run actual programs, right? I mean, you're a program organization. So can you explain a little bit more, tell us a little bit more about specifically the kind of program that you do with your CDBG funds?
A lot of employment and training, but it supplements a lot of our other programs. So many of our programs are not 100% funded. So the CDBG comes in and provides a safety net and helps us with some of the administrative costs. So like we have a senior farmers nutrition market program, which is heavily funded for direct services, but not enough on the administrative end. And you have to print vouchers and you have to have somebody go and collect the tickets. And so that CDBG money covers those costs. And so we get a bigger bang for our buck. In fact, they were having some challenges on the Big Island because of COVID, and they weren't able to distribute all their vouchers. And we have a waiting list, so we were able to absorb some of that and help some more of our clients. You know, with regard to the census, I just want to say real quick, I agree with Shar and Kohil. It's the personal touch that we've got to just keep driving home. I know the mayor has a representative on his cabinet from Lanai, Darlene Andrina, and she was instrumental with her husband, like calling and getting out and talking to people because they know her and trust her. That island's participation has increased considerably. So I think it's those kinds of efforts that we have to really focus on in the next couple of weeks.
So would you encourage people to volunteer to make these kinds of calls with your organizations? When you say, Kohio, you had 30,000 phone calls, I mean, how many people were making those phone calls?
Well, we used our network, right? So we provided grants to smaller nonprofits to get on the phones and help reach out to their networks. We provided them lists of people who we identified as being, what do you call it, hard to count. So we reached out to them. What I would encourage is I would encourage you to just make that direct call. At this point, with the amount of time we have to coordinate anything, it's really just making an ask of your neighbor. Hey, census is important. Have you taken it? Just go to 2020census.gov. Takes a few minutes. It's that kind of direct appeal at this point, with just 12 days left before we close down or wind down. So it's just a direct ask. If you're out there, if you're watching this, ask your family, ask your friends, ask your neighbors, have you taken the census, and provide them direction on where to go.
And the thing is that I think people need to really have it brought home to them that it's actual programs that support our schools, for example, and maybe they don't get enough of the sense that it's for ourselves that we're doing this. It's not being good citizens, although that's part of it, but to bring it home to actual programs that support our kupuna, our keiki, and all of that. So, there could. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, Senator, if we were to tag, put a tag on everything that is somehow connected to census. You're talking about freeways, schools, stop sign, everything has some link to census.
Yes.
It would be everywhere. So it's just, for most people, it doesn't compute, but that is the reality.
That's true. I think there are very few federal programs that have such a direct cause and effect as the number of people participating and the amount of dollars that comes to our state. So it's like, I don't know how to frame it in as simple a way as possible. Maybe some of you folks can think of a way to express it in a way that people go, oh yeah, the light bulb goes on, and they fill out that form. And so I want to thank you folks for what you're doing. And there is a possibility that it may not, the data collection may not end in September because there are lawsuits. There are already a San Diego judge, federal judge, that has put a temporary restraining order on the ability of the Census Bureau to just shorten the collection by 1 month. There's going to be another decision made this was a temporary restraining order that ends this week, I think. And so there has to be a more permanent addressing of the legal challenge. But it could result in the time frame to be October, in which case we just have to keep doing what we're doing and probably more of it as we make a last push, particularly even if it's extended through October, because we know that our participation in Hawaii is not what it should be. And it's really like shortchanging shortchanging ourselves and all the money that we should get from the federal government for participating. So thank you. Thank you very much. We'll keep you folks informed if you're not already informed about the court cases. And you know what, even if the case in the lower federal court goes the way it should, that means that extending to October, I think the Trump administration will appeal it to the Ninth Circuit, and who knows how far they will want to go to foreshorten the data collection time frame. So this is what we're up against, and thank you once again, each of you, for Charlotte, Kuhio, and Debbie, for everything that you're doing. And of course, if there are certain things that I can do in the next 2 weeks or so, please. I mean, this is one of the things that we're doing, to have this Facebook Live to get the message out once again to people. Just turn in those forms, participate. It's for our own good. Mahalo, everybody. Take care.
Mahalo, Senator.
Thanks,
Aloha.
Senator, for the opportunity.